team. I am that excited today to have a friend, a mentor, a leader for many, many years in the rugby league space, coaching space, Daniel Anderson. Mate, thanks so much. I've been trying to get you for a while. So nothing scripted, mate. We're just going to wing it, hey? But thanks so much because, mate, a lot of my listeners are coaches, leaders, teachers, a lot of teachers. All the things you've done, all of that. You've been a teacher, you've been a coach, a junior coach, you've been grand final coach, Super League Championship winning coach, you've been a leader, you've done all that. So all the people listening are going to love this episode. But most people that tune in straight away already know of your achievements. I want to go there later. To the people that don't know you, I just wouldn't mind going down that path, getting to know you and sharing you with them and what your influences were, and take us way back, you know, even like what drives you, what is your motivation and what drives you to do what you've done, because when you look back on it, you've done some incredible things. So, mate, do you mind taking me back to a little bit of growing up? And
so northwest Sydney, so Winston Hills.
Yep.
Grown up there, not a lot of schools in the area, especially Catholic schools.
Yep.
Not a famous Catholic school, just one at Borkham Hills. And then in those days, at the end of fourth grade, you weren't allowed to stay at the school, you had to go.
Right.
And so you either went to Oak Hill College or you went to Parramatta Marist.
Right.
So we turned right, we went down the road to Parramatta Marist. So that's where I then my education was in the Parramatta area. So where the current church is where I did my primary school, 5th and 6th grade.
Yep.
Swam in the Parramatta pool, trained in Parramatta Park, and then across the road, if you went to Westmead, the high school, the other side of the park, and that's where I did my senior secondary school. So that's schooling. So I've known Parramatta a long time. And from there I did a teaching degree, maths and science. So that was great fun. I was in an old era where, the study was part social, part study.
Yeah.
Made some great friends along the way. Still lived at home the whole time. And then very fortunate when I interviewed for my first ever job, professional job. My old Year 12 master was the maths coordinator at St Greg's College at Campbelltown. So of course he smoked cigarettes during the interview, and it's going to be great when you come here. And I only interviewed once, and even the science coordinator at those days, I was foisted upon him. So he thought he was doing an interview, but the bloke went, no, we're not interviewing, you just tell him what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's coming here. So I had one job, one interview, and that was sort of how I started my professional career.
Okay.
As a teacher. Footy was I just played rugby league. And so I played with some really good players.
Yeah.
Played with a lot of first graders, a couple of internationals, just played in the Parramatta district. But I had a chat with Spud Carroll, let's say 6 months ago. He come and saw me when I was in hospital.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him going, I played with you. He went, no. I said, under 14s.
Right.
And we rattled off the name of the team. Yeah, you were in the team, right? Yeah,
which club was that at?
Hills Bulls. So I played with Hills District Bulls until under 14s, and then I just played with schoolmates. So I was a very underwhelming rugby league player. Loved it.
Don't talk yourself down. I've heard you were pretty good.
Your
great mate Paul Donkin tells me you were pretty good.
I could see things. Yeah. But nowadays, you've worked with them, so you have to be able to run fast. You got to be strong. You got to be athletic.
What are you
Pretty
saying?
much most of the traits I had none of that. So I was tough. That was about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did play rugby league all my life, but even when I was my little brothers played, I helped coaching them, and we'd make up moves and set plays and all the fun bits of rugby league when I was just a teenager. So I guess it wasn't hard for me when I was about 19 or 20 that I was still playing some good footy, but I could still see things happening on the field, but I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't have the athletic tools.
Okay.
So I ended up helping other players run in the holes that I probably should have. So
Should have. You
I think it was
mentioned where you grew up. What about family? How many brothers and sisters?
I've got 4 brothers and 1 sister, so I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
Just a knockabout, Western Sydney family, all of us piled into one room. I lived in the same bedroom as my 2 brothers at 20, 19 and 17, and all the challenges of that is, where you're just young blokes, you're going out, and so it was very, very congested. And you spoke about Paul Donkin. It was his then girlfriend, fiancée, then his wife, who said she was in a house in Toongabbie, Pendle Hill, and she said, and he said to me, do you know anyone that wants to move out? I couldn't have put my hand up quicker.
Right.
So I was the one that moved out and moved in there at Pendle Hill, and that's sort of where I grew up, and I sort of met my future wife. She was the next door neighbour. So
Really?
yeah, we're living at Pendle Hill.
Okay. Because your family, how you grew up, I remember your father, Dougie. I used to love having a beer with Dougie after a game at the Eels there, when that's where we first started working together. But then you'd left, but your brother still worked there. So I'd always remember stories about Dougie, like such a hard worker. That's obviously been an influence on you.
Yeah, he had a real strong work ethic. It's not till after. It's years after.
Years later, you realise
you realise that when he worked Saturdays, and you'd go to work with him on a Saturday, and he'd be a banky Monday to Friday. He'd dig trenches on a Saturday. On a Monday night, he'd count the money at Fairfield Trots.
Yeah.
So he worked a lot of jobs, so that all of the kids could go to do the education they wanted to do. Yeah. And you had to swim. So swimming lessons and education were the focal point for Mum and Dad in our growing up, and then then it just becomes the normal costs of living. So again, Paul, I used to get Vegemite sandwiches, so I used to throw them in the bin. Paul Donkin used to get ham salad. He'd give them to me, and he'd go to the tuck shop and he'd buy a roll with some tubes, and he'd put all the tubes on that. I don't care about his habits, but I got ham and salad for almost the whole secondary years, from year 7 to year 10.
Right. Well, Paul, while we're talking about him, we've got to, I've kind of jumped. I'm jumping now to you were maths teaching at St Greg's.
Yes.
And what I do want to talk about, then you got involved in the Parramatta Eels in the junior system. So I'm going to jump a few years. You were coaching. It's a bit of a famous story through the juniors at Parra, was you were coaching a really good team. There was Nathan Hindmarsh, Eric Groth, Chad Robinson, Lenny Beckett. There's all these good. And I picture the great Harry Barth. There's vision of him in a 77 grand final. The head coach smoking, having a cigarette on the sideline. Just obviously would never happen these days. I picture this. There's old Harry Barth, who I wish I'd met.
Yeah.
Rod Reddy always said he was going to take me to meet him, and then he passed away, and I just never got the chance to meet him. But anyway, there's Harry Barth smoking on the sideline. It's a junior game. You were coaching. It might have been Jersey Flegg or SG Ball, and Paul Donkin was your assistant, was
Correct.
he? Timmy Barnes.
Yeah, Tim Barnes was assistant
and
as
there
well.
was Doc Death and Gary O'Donnell. Like there's a good
Super crew.
Good crew. Gary O'Donnell and anyway, the story goes Paul Donkin and Tim Barnes are doing the Harry Barth on the sideline under a little marquee, and the bench players are there. Lenny Beckett's mum, Wendy, screams out, "Paul," and calls him over to the fence. "Are you blokes effing serious? My son can't breathe in there and you're smoking cigarettes." So I believe that was the last of the Harry Barths because of Wendy Beckett.
Probably was. I don't remember it. They did things, those boys, which it was the day and the age. It wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't unusual for that to happen, but not in the ultimate athletic, development theme of the day.
I'll fast forward. I have to go back still, but I'll fast forward. You're then head coach of the Parramatta Eels NRL team years later, and you take us to a grand final, and I was working with you, and then we still had the same guys, Gary O'Donnell, Paul Donkin, Doc Death, and mate, they were on the sideline once. They had the little radio going with the horse races on during the game. And they were listening because Doc Death loves a punt, and he's listening to the horses, and he yells out to Donks like, hey, whatever race result or whatever, and you saw it from the box, and and I was on the headphones. You radioed through, I don't care what's happening at the races, can you blokes focus on the game? And those were great times.
Yes,
that
were
crew.
good times.
That was such a good crew. And I was never into the punting or the racing, but your brother was mad on it. He was really big on the greyhounds, which your father was into. And he used to come and talk to me about greyhounds every week. I was like, mate, I'm just not into it. But
I wasn't into it either, don't worry.
And he said to me, I'll tell you what to do, buy one with me so you have an interest. So I bought into 2 dogs of your brother's.
I could have told you don't do that.
And I raced once on TV, and I remember, oh wow, that's my dog. So, but that was about it. What a great crew, great memories. But let's go back. So you're maths teaching.
Yes.
It's quite interesting. You're now at the Roosters. You're working with Trent Robinson, who has so much respect for you. You used to drive him to Parramatta because you were the conditioner or the assistant coach.
So so Parramatta, I was an eager and ambitious. Teaching provided you finished school.
Yeah.
So you had the time. Teachers end up in a lot of representative coaching because the training starts at say 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, teachers finish school, so that's why a lot of them end up going into coaching rep teams because we had the time.
Yes.
And I had the time. So Kevin Wise, another great man of the Parramatta era, he invited me down so I was strapping ankles.
Yeah.
So the current bid chief for the PNG Cummels, Andrew Hill, I used to strap his ankles in there, so I started as a strapper.
Yeah.
Then I just went into being a trainer. And of course, I wasn't very good at that.
Yeah.
It was never my forte, but then I got into assistant coach. So during that time, Trent Robinson was he was at St Greg's College.
Yes.
And he was in my under-13s rugby league team, which I ended up coaching. So in those days, the Harold Mats was under 15. So, Trent ended up coming down to Parramatta and playing in the Parramatta Harold Matthews against, the current Silktails boss or our flag blue shirt, Stephen Driscoll.
Yeah.
And our manager for our flag, Terry Glassy, were in the South Sydney team.
Right.
So, you're just crossing 2 degrees of separation from so many people in those junior league competitions. So, Robbo played for Parramatta.
Yeah, okay. Well, I keep jumping back and forward. I was working with Robbo maybe 6-7 years ago, and I forget where you were at the time, but you weren't coaching anymore.
No.
And I remember he kept saying to me at the time, because I think he might have tried to get you at the Roosters.
Yep.
He said the best coach who's currently not working as a coach in the world is Daniel Anderson, because I think he really valued. We're all a bit from the same school around the fundamentals, and he really valued what you valued. And I remember he talked about trying to get you back here, and then all these years later, you're now back here working as his head of recruitment. Is that what we? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what a fascinating way the whole.
It does.
How
it does.
It turns out.
But that's the rugby league community. You will bounce into people forever.
Yeah.
And some you'll see regularly, and some it'll be years between, conversations, but you pick up the same conversation.
Yeah.
It's an easy relationship.
Yep.
Rugby league. There's not too many people that carry chip on their shoulder or, blow smoke up their own backsides. They're all very much down to earth.
Yeah.
So you bounce into heaps of people.
Could we go, just for the listeners that are coaches or they are at that level, junior rep coaching? It's a fascinating story, mate. You went from coaching in those junior reps to 7 years later, you were the head coach of the New Zealand Warriors.
Yes.
Taking them to a grand final. King of New Zealand at the time, you were. But let's go to your first job, your first full-time job in rugby league, because you went from all those junior reps, then you went development, started full-time development roles within the Parramatta district. Was your first full-time year my first full-time year at Parra, 2000?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We used to sit next to each other,
Yeah,
and we're at it again.
Yeah, well, that's it. It is that. As
20
I said, you keep coming around, you
25 years
bounce into
later.
people. So I coached through the juniors, and then I was assistant coach at reserve grade in 1998 to Peter Sharp.
Great man.
Another great fella.
Yeah.
And one training session, Brian Smith came down, who was head coach Parramatta, and he said, Peter Sharp is going to come be full-time with the first grade team. And I went, oh, right, okay, so who's coming in to be the head coach of reserve grade? And he went, you are, you idiot. And I went, oh, right, okay, so welcome to reserve grade. So that's how I got my start as reserve grade coach.
And
it wasn't full-time that year.
What a great year. Is that 99 you won it?
No, 98, we went to the grand final. We lost the grand final but I had coached, like, again, you get super players that come across you. I'd coached Dave Riola, who was the fullback in the grand final, against the Bulldogs. Mate, there was an all-in brawl. We got 2 sent off. They got 1 sent off. It was mayhem, absolute mayhem, the game. Yeah. We led 22-4 and got beaten 26-22. So it was just one of those games where you'll talk about it forever because of the ridiculous nature of it.
Of the game.
Then...
Because I forgot that year.
That was my first year.
I have memories of 99, you won it.
That's right. 99 was a bit different because I had a really, really good team.
Yeah.
Come the grand final, or come the week before the grand final, unfortunately, Parramatta lost in the grand final qualifier against the Storm.
Yeah.
When the first grade went out in those days, you didn't get automatic qualification for your reserve grade players. So it went back to how many games you'd played. Yeah. So I lost all these players. So that night we looked up and we went, we've got 12 players available for reserve grade grand final next week.
Wow.
So we went to the Jersey Flegg in those days, the under 19s.
Yeah.
They lost as well. So they're all all having a couple of beers. And I went into their, post-season celebration. I went, PJ Marsh, you're playing next week in the grand final. These kids are all 18, 19. Yeah. Jamie Lyon, just turned, you're in a grand final next week. Danny Sullivan, you're in a grand final next week. So I had to get all these blokes who had not played reserve grade.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one fella in particular. He come to every single training session, never played 1 minute of reserve grade and played a full game of first grade, Nathan Cross.
Yeah.
He scored a try as well. So the 99 grand final, and we cheesed it up. We had a strategy. I said, look, you blokes don't get too caught up. We're going to train hard, get ready for the game, but I'm going to, make us the underdogs, and I'm going to talk in the press about the game's all bar over. Look at their first grade team versus us. We've got 10 teenagers.
Yeah.
So we set the trap, and it was a trap. And mate, the Balmain boys, unfortunately, they just fell straight into it. They thought the game was already done. And I had Shane Werrett, Jason Bell, and Nathan Barnes. I still had.
You had some experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we gave them a real touch up, and that was in '99 grand final. Even Wes Maher, who's now a really quite big deal in the ASICs,
huge
Earth Moving.
Yeah.
He was in that team as well.
Do you stay in touch with all those guys?
Not a lot. I still bounce into it. They're still pleasant conversations. I still talk to PJ.
I bump into a few of them sometimes. They have great memories of that year. But you talk about, like Wes, for example, there's stuff he learnt in his life in team sports. Yeah. And leadership and getting the best out of teammates. I'm pretty sure he's possibly one of the youngest, maybe close to a billionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a story recently. He'd make a great podcast. Wes, if you're listening, you're welcome on the show anytime. But there's a good crew there, though. I'd love PJ on one day, because there's another story. You're then working full-time for Brian Smith in 2000. You win reserve grade. You're full-time in 2000, which was my first full-time year with him. Yep. We're sitting next to each other, we're having a great old time, and then out of the blue, one day you say, I'm going to New Zealand. I'm going to head coach the New Zealand Warriors. How did that happen? Because that was fascinating, and again, what a great achievement. You don't just get lucky. You're obviously very good, very, very good at what you do. But yeah, you had your first full-time year as an assistant and headhunted by the New Zealand Warriors.
Sometimes about timing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's timing, good fortune.
Yeah.
You know a person who lobbies on your behalf. I'm not sure where everything, but in the end it was the Sydney Olympics were on. I had a meeting with a bloke called Mick Watson in Chinatown because I was going to the volleyball.
Yeah.
Had tickets to the volleyball. He did a scenario, and if the scenario had 20 steps to it, I sort of walked away going, it's never going to happen. So I just got on with my life, and I was on holidays up on the Gold Coast and watched a TV news program. If there were 20 steps, about 15 fell.
Yeah, right.
And I'm watching the TV, and then I'm going, this might happen. And then I got a call, and I had a couple of interviews. I got flown to New Zealand for an interview for the Warriors.
Yeah.
Then I came back, and then they said, we're going to fly you over again for a second interview. If you get the job, you got to stay.
Yeah.
So I've got young kids, 3 and 1,
Yeah.
my Mrs. Natalie, and I had to leave them, and went over, got the gig, and started immediately, and it was just weird how it went. But
Incredible.
It's an interesting start.
But like you say, great timing, because I remember you telling me, I mean, credit to Mick Watson who wanted to think outside the box. You know, because like you said, I mean, there's some perception of, I definitely, as you know, don't believe it, but there's some perception of some people think you had to play 300 NRL games to be a coach. You hadn't played NRL.
No.
And I mean, some of the best coaches have never played NRL, and you're definitely the poster boy of that. But credit to Mick Watson, who was ready to think outside the box. But like you said, sometimes timing, I remember you telling me you went to the same school as him, you might have coached a junior team with him once before, and he's gone off on his commercial path, and then 10 years later realises, hey, the guy I'm actually looking for is right in front of me, and come and headhunted you. And they did think outside the box, which you did actually. You used to think outside the box with how you coached. And I remember talking to some Kiwi players a year later, the changes you made, the emphasis on fundamentals, but also having fun.
Yep.
You played a lot of games, a lot of competitive games, conditioning games, which might have been new to them.
Yes.
I'm not sure. You had some great players.
Of course.
You took PJ Marsh out of your 99 reserve grade team, took him with you, which I remember Brian wasn't happy with.
They blew up Deluxe about that.
Oh, I remember.
Because that was the June 30 days.
Right.
So we signed him on July 1.
Okay.
So, in the end, Parramatta did blow up
They
Deluxe.
blew up.
Oh,
yeah, I remember. I was in the office. Brian was filthy. But he then calmed down. He calmed down in the end. He said, look, I told Daniel, if you go play as a fair game, don't take my staff.
Yep.
That was his thing. But I remember immediately though, because we didn't want to lose PJ Marsh. No. Not at all. So you stole him, and what a great team. What are your memories of your time in New Zealand with that team?
Oh, very enjoyable time. And I remember, even as a coach, you watched other teams, and I've never been a copycat type of coach. Yeah. So, because I used to watch teams go, well, if you try and copy what they do, you're not going to be as good as them.
Yeah.
So how are you going to beat them when the big games come around? So I've always been you develop your own style with the talent you have. And the way I've coached in the different eras, the Warriors, then to St Helens and back to Parramatta, none of them were the same. Yeah. Because none of the players were the same. So, it was great putting that team together, the Warriors. It was very difficult because the World Cup was on. Yeah. I was working long hours, the middle of the night, trying to contact players. They were free agents, all of them. So lots of clubs come in and nicked all the senior players. Yeah. So I end up with a lot of very, very inexperienced but very talented juniors. Yes, okay. Likes of Clinton Torpey, Francis Melly, Henry Farfili, just to name a few.
Good crew.
Even even Stacey Jones was a first grader, but he became a leader in that era because we moved players away to allow him to blossom. So
to grow, yeah.
It was a great opportunity.
Well, there's some little lessons even in that. Like you just mentioned, moving some people to let someone else grow. I've seen that at different clubs when there's been some big decisions that had to be made to let someone else grow. Like,
Yes.
it's a huge decision in the end. I mean, Stacey Jones ends up one of the greats.
And it was, so in that time there, and this is, nothing was personal. I remember watching out, John Simon was a very senior player, been at Parramatta, I knew John Simon. Very good player, but I'm watching Vision going. Stacey was the 5'8",
Yeah.
and I sort of went, I've got to sort of, that was the point where I've got to move John
Yeah.
to allow Stacey some space.
Yeah.
And that's a hard decision, but in the end, you've got to do it. You've got to back yourself as a coach, and you're analysing players. You go, this bloke could be anything if he got a little bit more opportunity or hierarchy in the team.
Yeah.
So that was one of the early decisions, and Stacey went on and just fulfilled everything that everyone would have hoped for him.
Yeah, one of the greats. And what about some of that other crew? I've bumped into them since, and they love you. So guys like Monty Beetham, you know, in that crew, I think back like
Owen Guttenberg.
I mean, they all flew over to see you recently. Logan Swan.
Really. Ali Lauatiti, just some super.
Ali Lauatiti, what a player.
Yeah,
you debuted here?
No, he debuted.
Oh, had he?
Funny, because I was at Parramatta with Brian in 2000 going, remember looking going, mate, we've got to go after this kid.
Yeah.
So I remember it vividly, and then when I started at the Warriors, he was a free agent.
Yes.
And Brian was trying to get him. And so was Wayne Bennett at the same time. So Mick Watson, myself and Matthew Ridge, who was a consultant, we drove to Otara, you know, got lost, asked some young kid on a bike, mate, do you know where such and such street is? He went, yeah, mate, you go down here, turn left, turn right. There's a really big house there. That's Ali's house, and that's the street. I went, that's where we're going, Ali's house. So we went there and had banana cake and coffee and sat with the family, the sisters. They all peppered us with questions.
Yes.
And at the end of it, his dad went, he will be playing with you.
Okay.
And Ali was in England. He wasn't even there.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful memory.
Awesome. What a crew. And then you took them to a grand final. You ended up losing that game to the Roosters. Bit of a famous game here in the Roosters now. Like, they'll always talk about Brad Fittler when he got knocked out.
Of course.
What's your memories of that?
Oh, well, you know, Richard Villasanti will say it now. I probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
You know, there was no, obviously, players played hard in those days. There was no obvious thing, go out and get someone. It was you went hard, you played hard. And we ended up to our eyeballs up to that point, and then it sort of was the turning point in the game, and you come off and you lose the game, and you sort of, I don't think people realise how difficult it is to get to a grand final.
Yeah.
Then you got to win one. No, so you get someone like Cooper Cronk, who's got like 9, I think he's got 9 grand final appearances.
I think.
It's just
Crazy.
ridiculous, but there's people there that never get there.
Yeah.
You know, so it was, again, good timing, you go with it, you just keep going then after that. You just keep coaching and you try and get there again.
What about, you end up in England coaching the Super League, and like, I visited there when Justin Holbrook was coaching at St Helens a couple of years back. And you mentioned your name, and it's like the Godfather, like he's the king, because you won multiple premierships there, did you? Yeah. But could we go, before you get there, do you mind talking about what it's like to be sacked? Because this is a hard thing for people to deal with. There's listeners there that are, if they haven't been sacked, they need to get ready for it.
Yeah, it's
Getting sacked from the Warriors, like you had so much success. We had all those great memories, but then all of a sudden, how did you handle that?
Oh, it's fickle. You lean on your family.
Yeah.
So, you know, I lent on my wife Natalie, and at that point in time, it's like it's a bit surreal.
Yeah.
You can see it coming sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't get blindsided a lot because you know you're not performing. You know you lose games, and you can say, look, we produced and developed multiple, like over a dozen international players at the Warriors. But the KPI, the key performance indicator, is where you are on the competition table. In 2004, we weren't going that well. And it happens every now and again. So you do become very insulated and isolated.
Yeah, okay.
You're very careful.
Yeah.
And it gets quite legal as well.
Does it?
It's not real amicable.
Yeah.
You know, and as a coach in that time, I was, you know, you're not surrounded by a business. You're still an individual.
Yeah.
Whereas the club is a big beast.
Yes.
So they've got the tools, the people, the clout,
Yes.
where you can be discredited. You can have, you know, media reporting against you. It's a really, really nasty, at times, situation. So
Yes.
there's not a lot you can do. People will come, so I'll let you put your side of the story, but you want it to finish quickly.
Yeah. It wasn't
That's the
very
key.
amicable.
You want it to finish quickly. So you do have to batten down the hatches, rely on the people you trust,
Yeah.
and weather the storm.
Yeah.
And if you need to get legal, then you get legal, you know. But you've got to know that there's an end point to even the legal. Like,
Yeah.
it can't go on forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you don't have enough money to do it anyway. So
Yeah.
that's the point of it. You're sort of there going, I think I'm owed this,
Yes.
and if that can be an agreed position, but you're going to be the villain.
Yeah.
Everything that comes after you is, he did this, Anderson did this, he left us like this. So you're the villain.
Yes.
And that's the villain you're the villain. Anyone in any business who gets, you know, who leaves of their own volition or is sacked is the villain.
Yes.
People will blame stuff on you. I don't know what the time limit is on that, but for at least 3 months they can blame anything that's wrong in the shape in the business on you. So be prepared to be the villain.
I like going there because it's something no one really wants to talk about. And I mean, I've been there. Same thing with
You're
the
the villain.
media, same thing with the villain bits. Been there. Same thing with the legal bit, the whole bit. But I had some advice by one of our mentors, Brian Smith. He used to say to me, to be employable, you need to be sackable. He actually used to say that.
Yep.
And I used to ask, what do you mean? He said, well, there's obviously that bit to go through, and you hope you just cut it off and legal if you need to or whatever, but just handle it well. Handle it well, because people want to still employ you because you're good at what you do. But if you don't handle it well, they go, oh, do I really want to employ him if this is how ugly it gets?
Correct.
You know,
That's
so
right.
so you handled it well, and somehow I remember you telling me you might have been coaching the Kiwis and you bumped into.
I was just at a function one night.
At a
You know, I was
function.
this was 2003 on a Tri-Nations tour, and I was at some function. I was chatting with people, and you know, I've always said you're always respectful to anyone who wants to chat with you, any fan or anything. And so I was respectful, and I was chatting footy, and I love talking footy. And then a year later, you know, I get a phone call about St Helens, and someone in that conversation 12 months ago was Eamon McManus, who was the owner of St Helens, and
Yep.
you know, I met him for a coffee on that tour, and so it's almost like they were scoping me out a year in advance.
A year in advance, yeah.
Just seeing what sort of a person I was.
Yes.
So, you know, again, it's timing,
Yeah.
and never burn your bridges.
Yeah.
Always treat people with respect, and be as authentic as you can. And I guess that's what I've tried to do.
That's a great lesson, because, I mean, this episode's not about me, this is about you, but I've experienced the same. I was once a Rooster,
Yeah.
and I left, but left very amicable.
Yes.
And supported, Nick Politis supported me in that leaving, and so did Robbo. And then years later, there's times where, those awkward times where you probably just realise in between all that, Nick Politis comes to me once in the change room of a State of Origin game, says, we'll get you back one day at the Roosters. You know, that was like 5-6 years ago. And during a bit of a break and a bit of a tough time in the journey, someone like Robbo's one of the first people to ring.
Yeah.
So you find out at those times who really supports you.
Yep.
And yeah, it's you obviously had that, especially in your family and Natalie, but you obviously had that within, you got a pretty close footy community as well of good mates. Then you've gone to St Helens, and talk me through that, because I tell you what, this podcast needs to go across the UK, because I have the occasional listener message me from the UK and I write back, are you my only listener in the UK? But yeah, no, I occasionally get a few. But this needs to go out once we start telling you St Helens stories, because I went through their offices and your pictures all over the wall and stuff. Talk me through your St Helens times.
I was again, great support. Turn up there first day. I remember getting out of the plane. Went over on my own again because I left Natalie and the kids in New Zealand this time. You know, so they've had to pack up there. So I've had to go early to get they basically said, we need you to start. So I flew over there, walked into Knowsley Road. Anyone knows it's a magnificent old stadium. It was held together by Band-Aids.
Yeah.
And I go in there and there's a fire. Literally, they've got a fire brigade there and I'm out the front, jet lagged, and I'm going, this is good. And then the fire brigade leave and I go in, and outside my office is where the fire was on the floor. So I go into my office and it's no bigger than this room and there's 4 staff in it. And they went, that's your desk there, you know, so it's very humbling. It's great, wonderful, wonderful start, and played a few games, and it was like we went on a run. Had some huge injuries that first year.
Right.
In the big derby versus Wigan, had a couple of broken jaws. Deliberate, bloke got sent off.
Really?
Yeah, and Terry Newton it was. They didn't like each other at all. It was a really nasty rivalry, and we bowed out in the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup. We got beaten by Hull. And we bowed out in the grand final qualifier by Bradford.
Right.
But I knew that we'd had recruited Jason Kalis, Francis Melly, and Leon Price were coming to St Helens in 2006. So all these guys were top of their game, pros, internationals. So I knew we had a ripper of a team in 2006, because when I got over there, I had half a season to work out who could play. Like I had a 19-year-old James Graham, a 19-year-old James Roby, like superstars, Hall of Famers coming through. So I ended up just having just a hell of a team. So I remember walking in, meeting Kieran Cunningham, and they've got a statue of him now at St Helens.
Yeah.
And they were playing him in different positions. And I said, mate, for as long as I'm here, you'll be the hooker. And that was it. I got the biggest dog on board.
Yes.
And from that, he was my number one ally and supporter, and he wrestled every other bloke. And they weren't unwavering, but they'd come through a successful time anyway.
Yes.
So he was the one that dragged everyone, went getting behind this bloke. And
yeah.
so I ended up with like Sean Long, Paul Scolfoot, Paul Wellens, you name the Hall of Famers in England, and these boys were in the St Helens team.
How good was Sean Long?
He's a super player, like seriously one of the best, one of the top 3 that I've ever coached, just very, very bright. So 2006 we went nuts.
Well,
we won, we only lost 4 games out of 35.
Yeah.
And they were by a combined total of 10 points.
Well, there's some interesting lessons there. I mean, you got the big dog on board, Kieran Cunningham. You recruited guys that you knew and trusted. I mean, your connection with Jason Kalis goes back to coaching his brother and coaching him.
I refereed him.
And a Parramatta's kid. Yeah. Like, he went to the same school as you.
Yeah, that's right.
So your connection with Jason, who is now a Kiwi international and premiership winner, Francis Melly, you coached at the Warriors. So you brought in some ones you really trusted.
Yep.
And you got the trust of the big dog. And then you had some... I loved watching the success. What year did you get Jamie Lyon over?
Well, he was already there. So he was there by the previous...
Right.
By Ian Millwood, he came over there. So he quit the NRL.
Yes.
For, a bit of mental fatigue probably.
Yes.
And anyway, he turned up in St Helens, and Willie Talao and Jason, who just had that's just such a good bunch of guys.
Yes.
Really, they were very connected with each other, great mates. They fought for each other. We had a mix of English, Aussie, Polynesian. I had Maury Fusavalu, who was a dynamite. He was a Samoan rugby international. So 2006 we We won games whenever we wanted to. So we won the Challenge Cup that year. We won the premiership that year. We came back and we won the World Club Challenge against the Broncos, who had Lockyer, Sivanasiva, Webke, all the stars. And then we won everything. Just tore it down that year.
And how good is the atmosphere at some of those English games? I've never worked in England. I will do it one day because it's such a good environment and good atmosphere, and you can kind of feel it. When you say to someone, picture being back in England, you can kind of feel that.
Of course.
You know?
There was an energy. So I lived right near the club. I walked to the games.
Yeah.
And the field was very old, but it was wonderfully, so one of the great stories from me is first game I coached, I sit there and there's this giant big pole right in front of me, and I went, this is ridiculous, I'm the coach. I can't even see the field. So I went to the CEO and I went, mate, that's the terrible seat.
Yeah.
He said, well, you sit in every seat in the grandstand, whichever one you want, I'll slap coach on it.
Yeah.
There were 200 seats, that's it.
Yeah.
That was the stand. So I go, I sit in every seat and I go, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the best seat in the house. Bang, slap, coach. So next game I'm sitting there and a bloke called Eric Ashton, very, very, very famous.
Right.
500 games in the Super League, coached St Helens, chairman, again, another seriously powerful Hall of Fame rugby league player. He goes to me, he goes, mate, I've had that chair for 27 years. I said, you had a good run. I never got out of the seat. He moved on and sat somewhere else. He was good, buddy. He knew I was coaching, and we had a chuckle about it.
Leading the team out onto Wembley.
Oh, yeah.
In your suit and your tie and your
special.
robe. You had the red rose there, I think.
You did, yes.
I remember watching you on TV. How special was that? Did you grow up? Like I remember growing up, getting woken up by my dad to get up and watch the Challenge Cup final. Did you grow up similar? You
saw the big games.
Yeah,
we saw the big games. Didn't see them all.
It was huge, wasn't it?
It was huge, and everyone remembers the Peter Sterling versus Brett King.
That's right.
That was
Hull versus Wigan.
Hull versus Wigan. Everyone remembers that. I didn't realise how important it was. See, the first year when I went there and we lost, and the disappointment from the board through to the fans.
Right.
So the next year we won it, and they did an open top bus, and it was bananas. It was super. So we end up winning 3 years in a row, and that's sort of what seals your legacy.
Yeah.
And it also, you got to ride the good times.
Yeah.
They're hard to get. Keep saying they're hard to get when you're coaching.
Yeah, well, that's a good
Don't
point.
take them for granted.
Don't take them for granted.
No.
You end up coming back to Parramatta, and I'm still there. And you'd go on and come back, and here we are, we're back together again. You take us to a grand final. If people watch some of the highlights of that 09 year, they'll be fascinated watching. If you Google YouTube 09 highlights, be fascinated how we ended up playing. I mean, Hainsey went on a run, Fui was on fire, Folletti, Matteo, but I don't know if people realise it didn't start that well.
No, I brought back from England. So I was when I finished in the UK, we were coming home for family's sake. My daughter was starting high school. Sort of made a decision as a family we need to come back. We'd been away 8 years. So we come back, we said we'll do a month in America on the way back. And I've gone, you hand everything back, phone, laptop. So I think I'm in New York, and I go to a Macca's and I go onto my Hotmail and there's 68 messages, and I went, it's a bit weird. And then there was 58 of them from my agent, Jim Bannigan. Yeah. Where the hell are you? And so I ring and he goes, mate, Michael Hagan has resigned. Parramatta job is open. Are you keen? I went, yeah, I'm interested, but I'm still not back for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
He said, can I say you're interested? I said, yeah. So when I landed, I had an interview the next day and away we went. Yeah. But you're right, fast forward to the start of the season, I've sort of come in with I wanted to replicate a little bit of what I did at St Helens with the style of players, and I had pretty solid off-season. And we were horrible in the first 4 weeks. Horrible, Yeah. And it just didn't work. And I remember Brett Finch was the halfback, and I went, what I've done does not suit him. Yeah. I actually said that, to myself when I did the announcement. So I went to him, actually, and said, mate, I've done you a disservice, I've done this wrong. We're going to change the way we play to suit you. And he went, I'd like a release.
I remember, sorry, you're on a roll there. I should let you keep going. But I remember, I thought it was brilliant coaching actually. You walked into our video room and you said, boys, it's not working. And I'm going to wear it, and I'm smart enough to know we need to change it.
Yep.
I remember that. And I thought, wow, that you could easily have been stubborn and gone, this is what we're doing this way. But you actually knew. I guess that was when you realised you can't just copy paste there.
No, that's right.
And you realised, and you were you changed it early enough.
Yep.
But back onto the Finchy bit, I didn't know this part.
Yeah.
You said to him, "I'll change for you. We need a play to suit you."
And it was very amicable. He
said he wanted out.
Yeah, and it was amicable. It was done very easy and no hard feelings, I think, from either side. And he went on to play for Melbourne against us in the grand final.
Yeah.
We went on to, unearth Daniel Mortimer, who was a teenager at the time. So, again, it's like sliding doors a little bit. So
it was a bit like letting Johnny Simon go to let Stacey grow. Like you let Finchy go and others grew. And the way we ended up playing, we were able to let the
But I
big
didn't
dog
envisage that either.
No.
I didn't envisage that at that stage. So, again, we are mired in the bottom 4 or 5.
Yes.
And then we almost threw all the toys out and went, just go and play some footy.
Yeah.
Let's sort of release, like a pressure valve, release the shackle pressure of playing to a certain style. And so the boys started to offload a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it became a little bit where they sort of piggybacked each other.
Yeah.
And it completely changed the way we saw the game as a group.
Yeah.
And it brought that's when Jared Hayne went on a tear.
Yeah. No, I have great memories of that season, but the people, they don't understand how tough it was. I mean, we were nearly planning for the next year.
That's exactly right.
Like we nearly had to win every game for 9, 10, 11 games or something. Then we were fast, so we did. Went on a run, won all those games. We played the Dragons in the last round of the year that we didn't have to win. It was the only game. We finally knew we were going to scrape in to 8th. But you also knew Dragons were first. We're going to have to play them the week after. That was a masterstroke. People don't know. I mean, nobody throws a game at all, but you actually gave the boys nothing that week, my memory. No prep. No video, no talks about them, no this is how we're going. You just said, go and play. We didn't have
Hindy, I think, that game.
That's right.
And Hainsey were both out too.
And you knew what was coming the following week. We're playing at Cogra. They pumped us. Oh. And you grabbed, I remember it to this day, you grabbed a couple of the staff, said, hey, don't worry. Next week I've got it. We're winning next week. And then you sold that to the players as well. After the game, they were all disappointed. I even think Johnny Howard walked in, the Prime Minister walked in, and we're all like, all the boys are shouting, and you got, hey Johnny. But anyway, but I remember you sold it to the players that we are winning next week. Sorry, I've given you nothing this week, but next week we're back here, we're playing the Dragons, and we did. We beat them in that. It's a bit of a famous semi-final now. Like it really sent the Dragons going that way. They were minor premiers, and. I mean, Eric Growth has that intercept, and Hainsey scores that ridiculous try that'll be on the highlight reel forever. That was a bit of a masterstroke.
I probably learnt that at times more in New Zealand, and I've spoken with Robbo here about when you're in the bottom half of the comp, or you're scrapping to get into the semi, there's times where you're going, look, especially the Warriors, we're going to be really hard to beat at home. But when you've got a couple of players out, it's going to be a tough ask. So you're sort of there going, we're going to go hardy, but really if someone's banged up, I'm going to have to rest them this week to get them ready for next week. Because I need to win next week or it's all over. Yeah. So you're a bit more strategic with your players that are injured or gassed or mentally fatigued
Yeah, okay.
than if you're riding. When I was at St Helens, we didn't need to do any strategic stuff at all
Yeah.
because you were winning games constantly. So when we were at Para, we were scrapping for 8th.
Yeah.
So you had to be strategic on occasions. Go, right, we've got to win this game especially because that'll boost us for another game. And you start playing with strategy, that sort of stuff as the season goes on.
It was a masterstroke. Well, some of those finals. You did something interesting, I remember, because I used to take the team out and you'd wait till kick-off or whatever, but you'd come and go, Hayden, tell them, run across to the crowd before warm-up. Run over to that crowd, feel that energy, which is probably an England thing, and the boys would do this, the crowd would erupt, they'd go around the fence, then would come back and warm up, prep, play. You got the team to do that through all the finals, and this momentum was just building and building. Like that prelim final against the Bulldogs, that was a grand final. The Bulldogs versus Eels rivalry that night. But I remember you told them again, run across there, acknowledge the crowd, and soak it all up and enjoy it. You know, there's some really great memories. I mean, that grand final loss though, they're still painful, aren't they?
Yeah, probably. They're all very painful.
Yeah.
Because they're moments. There's only people talk about moments. You know.
Yeah.
Sports people do talk about moments, but even for us who aren't players, there are moments where the ball bounces one way instead of the other way, or it's just like there's a decision that's made out of your hands. A referee makes a decision, and you still bite down on that years later, but. In the end, we had a good crack at it as best as we could that year, and people enjoyed our run.
Yes.
You could tell by the Parramatta community, because we do. You remember, you are representing bigger than just you and your family. It's the whole community, and the community love it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of part of the validation that you've performed well is that community involvement.
It was great, mate. But the pain. Hindy grabbed me after the game and cried on my shoulder. There's a photo of it somewhere where, mate, he's a grown man, could not let me go for about a minute, bawling his eyes out. It's hard to explain to people how painful a loss is. Yep. But now, all these years later, you look back on great memories of it. But I was next to a guy during the Parramatta Penrith Grand Final, and this guy was like 60s, 70s, bawling his eyes out. And it just made you realise how much it means to the community, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully one day, for their sake, hopefully for that guy, hopefully he sees some success one day because it means so much to him. Just not against the Roosters.
No, correct.
So, mate, that time, and then I see you now, mate. I mean, I don't know how much we go to your situation now, right? But your coaching and your passion for seeing players develop. I sit in this office here and I see a young player walk past, and you're calling, hey, they always make a right turn to come and say hello to you to start with. But I see you say to a young kid, mate, great game on the weekend. I saw in the 33rd minute, I saw you throw this past her, whatever. And I see the kid's face light up. I've watched you a few times do it. You must have an unbelievable memory for every piece of a game, because these players are coming through. That some of them are playing in the under-19, some are playing in the 21, some are playing in NRL trials, or some are playing in the under-17s. And they walk past and you know everything they did on the weekend. That passion for coaching and inspiring other people, it's been in you since you're a teacher. It's still coming out now. It's just you, right? Can you share a bit of that about what is your philosophy on all of this stuff? What is this passion you have?
You've got to love it, and I do. So that's the first thing. You know, I've never... Everyone that knows me knows I've never whinged about coming to work at the Roosters or any of the footy, you know, good, bad or indifferent, still love going to work. What you've said is I do think that communication, and I'm good with some bits. Like you're right, I'll have some Rain Man moments where I'll remember innocuous stuff from years ago, minutes of games and that, and then I'll forget someone's birthday, my son's birthday or something like that, you know. So, but I do like to. There's a lot of people that coach young kids, coaches, parents. I don't think I want to put too much pressure on them. I like players to, until they get to the professional arena, you're trying to extract what they're good at.
Yeah.
And there'll be things they're not good at too, don't worry. But it's not about harping on about what they're not good at. So encouraging them to keep doing the things they're really good at, and maybe giving a couple of tips on how they can lift their worst part of their game just up a little notch, cut a notch or two. They'll never be good at it,
Yeah.
but they'll be better than hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's important that, I think this is not just for sport, this is business, that if you can bring up a person's their worst performing area up to an average, and the very good that they have stays very good or better, well, aren't you even more productive straight away as a unit?
Yeah.
So that's all I'm really trying to do with these young players, is encourage them to know they're good footy players. It's very hard to get there, mate.
Yeah.
It's hard to get one NRL game.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get 100. It's really hard to get 5 years.
Yeah.
So all we can do, you and I, in our roles now and roles gone past, is try and, we know where the correct steps are. They might slip on a slippery stone on the way up the path, but we mostly know where the good steps are, where you can get a bit higher. We can't get them all the way there. I tell a lot of kids now, I'll get you to the NRL, but I can't keep you there.
Yeah.
That's gone beyond me then. That's more about you.
Yeah.
So I do that. I do invest. I think in business, in sport, in family, you need to invest time into your kids.
Yeah.
You need to invest time into your players. You need to invest time into your workers.
Yeah.
If you want to get anything out of it.
There's some gold in that, mate, because you're very good at it. Like, there was a lot of people rallied behind you recently with your, there was a function I attended, and it was the who's who of rugby league. Was there 600 people in that function for you? But there was a lot of players, mate, that I got around. You probably didn't even get to see many people that day. There's about 600 people at this function, all there for you. But when you went to all the players, so I went to a table of all our old 09 team was there from the Eels. Daniel Mortimer was there, Joel Reddy, Eric Groth, you know, who else was there?
Timmy
Nathan
Manor,
Kalis,
Hindy.
Timmy Manor, Jeff Robson.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
they're all there, and mate, they look back now of like how much you did for them in their career, and then I went and bumped into some crew from the Warriors, players from the Warriors, like superstars of the game, had flown over to see you. And you just looked around the room, but then there was also coaches that you helped, mate. Like I don't know if it's a pinch yourself moment to realise how much you've impacted people's lives. And then now I see you doing it day to day now with these young kids. Like, that's just in you, isn't it? Or who influenced you in your career? Like, what other coaches?
It's funny, you know, you said that, like, I've had this question asked for it. I didn't really have any influences because I wasn't in the professional arena.
Right.
I was just a underwhelming average rugby league player who loved the game, who found his way into coaching through teaching, and loved coaching. So I just kept on coaching every year.
What about in the coaching space at Greg's? Who was it? Was it Peter Mulholland?
Peter Mulholland was up the top of the tree. But again, you just get on with coaching your team.
And what about when you worked with Brian Smith?
He was a great educator of coaches.
Yeah.
Brian was.
Yeah.
So he did allow you to work you hard.
Yes.
We worked hard there.
Yeah.
But he also educated you along the way.
Because you had a real love of fundamentals, you still do. And that was, I guess, not being a superstar player, that was your version of being a great coach.
I don't think I knew any better.
Yeah.
So you sort of, you weren't involved in professional environments. So every step you took, okay, this is a bit new. And that's why when you went to England, I learnt to coach older players.
Yeah.
You know, and even back then, going back, but again, I remember Kieran Cunningham say, remember, I've played 400 games, but I need to be coached.
Yeah.
And I really love that comment from him.
That's great.
Because sometimes you shy away from the senior players, the stars, because they're already there, but actually they want to be coached.
Yeah.
So the star worker, the star athlete, the star player, they still want your investment in them.
And then that obviously made you more confident knowing
Correct.
that your star player wanted, because then, I mean, wow, I'm just thinking even like you coach of the national team, you're coaching New Zealand, you weren't a Kiwi, and they've put their whole country's put their faith in you. You kept growing in confidence, and then you got players like that, 400 gamers, like Hall of Famers. So, yeah, incredible story that. I'm glad you shared a few little lessons there. You mentioned ride the highs. What about the lows? Because there's people now listening.
Yeah.
Some are got a high going on, but there'll be someone listening that is going through a tough time in the journey.
Yeah,
what about the lows?
Like I said, like we said before, you sort of got to weather. You just got to weather the lows, and I'm a big believer in you'll be rewarded for your effort.
Yeah.
So if you maintain a high level of effort, good things will come.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why always respectful to everyone.
Yeah.
You know, the only negative story I think I've ever had is I was in the Warriors post game, we'd lost one, and some bloke had me up against a wall and he was telling me this and that, and I reckon it was 45 minutes, and I'm sitting there going, right, and I just went, look, mate, you got bad breath. That's the worst thing I've ever said. And he left straight away.
You've got bad breath, so the conversation stopped.
The conversation finished. That's the only thing. Other than that, I always try to give people time.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why there's probably not. It's not rare to have a card signed by me, because you sign everything or you get photos with everyone. That's what I would implore the current stars of our game. Don't.
Yeah.
You know, make sure you give of yourself.
Well, that's a great lesson. It's really not hard to give you time.
No.
And now you've just said that, I think back of moments I've had in sport. Now, I've had coaches give me their time that I may have only met them once, that I follow them forever. So I've talked about it in some other episodes. Sir Alex Ferguson invited me to have lunch with him once. And I did. He would not even remember me, but he gave his time, and in that, little lessons that I've taken on forever. I mean, that's a fair name drop. We'll just catch that one.
That's
down
okay.
here,
I met him too.
But he gave his time.
Yep.
And you think about it, like, I was with a UFC fighter once, and Dana White, he's obviously a promoter and a businessman, but he gave his time.
Yep.
We had a 5-minute chat. A couple of years later, in the backstage of a weigh-in in Vegas of a fight, hey Dana, I met you in Sydney. Oh yeah, how's James going? And how's James Tahuna going? Like, he gave me time, made me feel like, and I follow him. I followed him. I really respect that guy. He wouldn't have a clue who I am. It's not that hard to give your time, is it? You know, you gave your time to that guy in a function in 2003, and 2 years later you're coaching the club he owns. And you didn't do that for that reason, it just turned out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I think there are those moments that you just have to continue to make an effort.
Yeah, yeah. And now, mate, the resilience, the positivity you show to coaching now, but there's been some tough times.
Yep.
How are we going?
Yeah, good. Finding a new normal. That's the thing that I'm found. Yeah, it's taken a while. So I'm, getting by a bit better all the time, settled in a little bit more at home. Plenty of challenges still. That's going to be ongoing, but you know, I go to watch rugby league games live, looking forward to the 2024 season. Happy to, you know, delegate, got great staff, working with great staff. So I've just got to find step by step each day.
Yeah.
So still doing therapy personally.
Yeah.
That won't stop in the short term.
Yeah.
We'll see where we get to, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know, wouldn't mean too much hearing it from me, but I respect it massively, mate. The bit I said about, I see the reaction these young players have when you talk to them. And it's in my kind of philosophy around coaching is to show I care and show what I care about. But I look at you and I think, my God, his whole focus is making that kid grow today or feel good about himself today, but you're going through your own stuff.
Yeah, well,
like somehow, I've never heard you complain about it once, and there must have been some dark times.
Yeah, of course there is. But this is I love doing it. So
yeah,
I love coming to work, you know. And as you said, when those players come, well, they'll be tough. There's going to be tough times for them. Not everyone can get there.
Yeah.
So I feel a duty, as you do,
Yeah.
with young, especially teenagers, going, we've got to make sure they don't drift off.
Yeah.
You know, where it becomes harder for them to succeed. So you and I have got enough experience to go, this wide path we're making is a path where you can extract the most and potentially get success.
Yeah.
If you wander down that way, we can't guarantee you'll get back.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep them on the path. But in the end, most of them have to do it themselves. But for you and I get very excited watching young players like Siwa Wong play first grade in 2023 for the Roosters. I saw him when he played Harold Matthews when he was 15 years old, and you've seen these kids come through, and they've had bumps in there. It hasn't been a perfect life of rugby league for them. You watch these young guys come through and they've had injuries, and when they get there, you're almost as happy for them as the families as they are.
Yes. Well, it ends up being your biggest highlight. What you love is seeing a kid make a debut. But I won't keep you all day. Let's just quick fire a few. The best leader you've ever worked with, coached. The best leader you've ever coached.
Paul Wellens.
Paul Wellens. Yeah.
He made decisions constantly that were the best for the team. Now he's very successful. He's started coaching St Helens himself. You sort of knew back then he'd be a good coach.
Yep.
He was a selfless man when he played.
Most fun person to have around a team and the energy they brought to a team.
Well, that was they called him the Aussie Mafia when I was at the Warriors, and I'd come to Australia and just my mates would be the match day staff, and they'd be the coaches in the coaching box, they'd be on the sideline, they'd be running the shirts. They're just my mates. So they'll always be the most fun I have has been around them.
Let's name drop them. There's a few beauties there.
Oh yeah, there's Greg Harris, Paul Donkin, Ricky Hanna, Jeff Cowling, Mick Hollins, Mish Dupre, you know, all super guys that love being involved with the Warriors in those years.
Well, because when you think about it, there's a lesson. You surround yourself with people you totally trust and enjoy their company.
Yeah.
And it just creates success, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Well, it did then for us, for sure.
Toughest player?
That's between Ivan Cleary and Kevin Campion.
Oh, really? Ivan Cleary?
Ivan's a tough guy.
Was he?
Yeah, he had a knee injury at the Warriors when I was there, and they suggested surgery, and he point blank looked at the surgeon and went, "I'm not having surgery."
Right.
And just kept playing. He carried shoulder injuries. He was a proper tough guy.
He played fullback for you in that grand final?
Yeah, and he played, he won't like this, because I used to play him at hooker with Brent Webb, so Brent Webb would play dummy half in attack and fullback in defence, and Ivan had to play fullback in attack and then hooker in defence.
He never told me that.
I know, I'm positive he didn't like it when we had to do it, but
I bet.
he took it for the team. He was a
I
good
bet.
guy. Tough guy. Kevin Campion, tough guy.
You must love seeing those guys now, Ivan coaching.
Of
You
course,
must love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
His episode on here is the most listened to one.
Yeah, yeah.
Until now, this is going to overtake him.
No, Ivan was proper tough guy.
Yeah, wow, okay. And Brent Webb now the same. You've now got him in your recruitment system.
Oh yeah, he was a super. Just coming out of Brisbane West.
Yeah.
You know, you got to. In those days, you took a punt. You didn't have big squads or big lots of staff.
Yeah.
You had to unearth rough diamonds yourself.
Yeah.
So you could do that back in those days.
Now, Nathan Hindmarsh, he was never funny. Do you remember? He wasn't funny, but now he's known as this character.
No.
Do you think he was never funny, or is that just me?
Oh no, he was never funny. He was a wonderful kid, and I remember he was a wonderful young kid.
Because he loves you.
He was he was the most competitive player ever, who was terrified. I mean, terrified of carrying the footy.
Yeah, right.
Scared. Remember, we had to do a set-up play, 3 up for a hindy.
Yeah, right.
That was SG ball. He was so good with the footy. Like, he's renowned for his defence.
Yeah.
But he was so good with the football. I played him at fullback once.
Did you really?
Caught a bomb and ran 90 and scored like.
Mate, I still do.
Yeah.
Great mate of ours, but I just never thought he was funny, and now he's earning a squillion being this character.
I think he's the fall guy.
He must be.
I reckon it is. I reckon he's tapped into his very...
As a player, character, toughness, fit.
First
my
picked.
God.
Yeah, if you named your team, if you named your top 13 of all time, he's in there easy.
Yeah, I love him. Still do have to get him on the show. Well, thanks so much, mate.
No problem.
Mate, I really appreciate it. I know there's little lessons in there just in a chat to coaches, to teachers, and to players. I mean, there's players that are listening to young players.
Got to hang in there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, mate.
Too easy.